Shall we start?
Mhm.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Environmental Commission of Ann Arbor. And I'd like to first say that I'm sorry to tell you that Steve Brown, our chair, is not feeling well tonight. And so I am sitting in as co-chair and Rita Mitchell. And I want to welcome you all to the January 27th, 2022 electronic meeting of the Environmental Commission. The meeting is in accordance with the executive orders of the governor to effect social distancing and mitigate the spread of COVID-19. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. And I ask your patience if there are technical issues. I'm new at doing this, or not well experienced, and there may be technical problems, who knows. Public comment will be via telephone only, and to speak during public comment, please call 888-788-0099 and enter meeting ID 989-2851-1637. And there'll be some information on how to raise your hand and get the attention so that you can be called on to speak. This information is available also on the published agenda in the public notices section of the city's website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watch-CTN. So with that, let's move forward with our agenda. Galen, would you give the land heritage statement?
Sure. All righty. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, including Ottawa, Ojibwe, Bodiwadni, and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands like almost all property in the United States on lands obtained generally in unconscionable ways from indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals. And that's the land use statement.
Thank you. Galen, would you now call the roll, please?
Sure. Commissioner Needham. Commissioner Needham. Okay. Councilmember Dish.
Present from Evanston, Illinois.
Okay. Commissioner Graham. Commissioner Graham.
Present, Ann Arbor.
Okay. Commissioner Gibb Randall.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Griswold.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Collywart.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Chairperson Brown. Chairperson Brown. Vice Chairperson Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Okay. Commissioner Vandenbroek.
Here.
Commissioner Oriole.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Zing.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Marson.
Here in Ann Arbor.
All right, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. And thanks everyone for being here. I would like to now ask for approval of the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion?
So move.
Chris Graham, and I see a second by Councilmember Griswold. Great, thank you very much. And now I would like to ask for approval of the minutes from December 2nd, 2021. Commissioner Gibb Randall, and a second from Commissioner Marson. Thank you. Great. And now we will move on to public commentary. and I'll read a statement about the public commentary. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Please call. I'll say the number again. It's 1-888-788-0099. And the meeting ID is 989-2851-1637. Information is also on the agenda and on the video feed for this meeting. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. And when speaking, please move to a quiet area, mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. And to unmute yourself, it is *6. So, Galen, do we have anyone who's ready to talk with us?
There are no callers.
No callers? Okay, then let's move on with our meeting. We are intending to have some special presentations, although I don't see those additional speakers. Galen, do you see either anyone from the We Care Denali group or the WERMA, Theo Egermont?
I'll take responsibility for that one. Susan Tolman should be signing in, and I'm going to just call her on my cell phone.
Okay.
On that. See if we can't get her to sign in here.
All right.
She's coming in. She's speaking from Washington State. And is the head of, or she's the executive director of the Compost Manufacturing Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
And they are in constant communication with the We Care Denali setup. And also Rod Tyler, who's the regional director of the regional manager of We Care Denali. He was invited in also to speak. Mm-hmm. So let me see if I can't get them.
Okay, thank you.
On the line here.
Yeah, I'll check with Theo. He works in my office. I didn't know he was on the agenda until I saw the agenda a few minutes ago.
Whoops. Thank you. Let's give it just a couple of minutes and see if we can line these up.
Hey, Rita.
Yes.
While we're waiting, I would just like to point out we have a really long agenda tonight.
Yes.
So if we're really having a hard time with some of these things, I would suggest that we table something. So just wanted to put my vote in for that if we're struggling with getting people.
Right. Yep, that's fine. I think that's an easily doable. And I know that there's one that's going to be tabled anyway. It's the one on the potassium iodide. Steve was going to lead on that. And so that one is definitely off the agenda for tonight. I guess I should have mentioned that when we did the approval of the agenda. My apologies. I wonder if we should move up. Could I move to rearrange the agenda so that we have two speakers who are available, Evan Pratt and Dan Bicknell. We could move forward with the issue on the Gelman plume. Would that be acceptable to the group?
Yeah.
Yes.
I see a yeses. Okay, great. And Chris, are you making it through with the other group?
She assured me this afternoon, like at 3 o'clock even, and that she was on for tonight. Okay. So I don't know.
Okay, well, let's just go ahead with the Gelman plume question, and then we'll move back if we can do so. Right?
Agreed.
And so, thanks. So I want to just give a brief introduction, and then we'll have some further discussion. Last year, actually in January, the City Council and followed by the Environmental Commission supported the work of the Water Resources Commissioner, who is Evan Pratt, present tonight, to move forward with giving a notice of violation to the Gelman Company because of an infiltration of 1,4-dioxane into the Allen Creek drain that runs through, that was identified specifically in the West Park area moving toward Chapin Street. And since then, there has been a presentation by Gelman of a work plan to address that, but the plan was considered insufficient or incorrect. And so we're waiting to hear more from Gelman to move forward. So this is an opportunity for us to talk over the kind of the history of it, see where we are going, and then I have also prepared a resolution for us to consider tonight for additional support. So with that, I would like to turn it over first to Dan Bicknell, who is the president of Global Environment Services, Associates, and who has been following the Gelman plume issue for a very long time. And he has prepared some information for us to discuss, right? So Dan, are you?
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Mitchell. Galen, is it possible for me to share my screen? Is it visible now, Galen?
It is not yet.
Okay, thank you.
See that Evan is co-host. We need Dan right now. I don't know if Evan, if you want to present something, we'll definitely set that up for you too.
Yeah, I don't see a screen share button either, but I'm fine with a verbal to the extent that it doesn't confuse people. I have a hard time visualizing stuff sometimes without maps, but I know everybody's city residents, but I'll still yield the floor to Dan for the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought maybe, Evan, we could just quickly kind of go through the status of the Allen Creek drain stormwater contamination, and then quickly touch on, the MS4 permit, if that's okay. The Allen Creek drain, which we all know goes through the city of Ann Arbor, has been impacted by the Gelman dioxane plume contamination, and the Gelman site's probably about 3 miles away from the current West Park area, which is becoming contaminated. And in 2019, 20, and 21, there was sampling done through Evan's office, the Water Resources Commissioner's office, and the Eagle, Great Lakes Environment and Energy. And the new Allen Creek stormwater data collected by Eagle in 2021 shows the continued dioxane plume degradation of the Allen Creek stormwater. Currently, Gelman is in non-compliance with the Washtenaw County Water Resources Commissioner January 2021 notice of violation, as Rita was talking about. The NOV covers the Gelman dioxane groundwater contamination seeping into the Allen Creek drain. And that's a violation of the federal municipal separate storm sewer system permit. In November 8th of last year, Eagle sampled the Allen Creek drain and found in 3 locations dioxane, one at 33, one at 16, and one at 2.5. And again, this confirms what was generally found in 2019 and 2020. And as a consequence of this dioxane seeping into this MS4 permitted Allen Creek drain above remedial criteria, it's a violation of this municipal separate storm sewer system MS4 permit. Additionally, in November or December of last year, they sampled the West Park pond and found 1 part per billion dioxane in the area. Officially, to be in compliance with the MS4 permit, no dioxane is allowed into the Allen Creek drain stormwater. Here's a quick overview of the plume area. different concentrations. The yellow line is the 85 part per billion line. The red line is above that 85 part per billion level. The blue lines are the Allen Creek drains. There's 3 main laterals of them. And if you look upstream, if you will, the flow of the groundwater is from west to east, as well as the drain flows from west to east. You see that in this location here, Wildwood Arbor View, there's not any dioxane, nor is there in Maple Ridge. But as the run goes down towards West Park, you see that there is contamination here of 17.3 in 2019, 49 in 2020, and 33 parts per billion in 2021. Similarly, further downstream in Chapin Street, you see the dioxane at 9.1, 2.8, and 16 in those 3 years. And if you go down to this southern reach, you do see dioxane at 8th Street at 2.5, and in the past at 1, and in the past at Murray, it was about 1.1. So there is a continued problem that we have here with the dioxane in the plume seeping into the, if you will, fissures in the storm drain, which is normal. Normally you'll have infiltration of clean groundwater, but unfortunately, because the groundwater is contaminated with dioxane, you're having this dioxane seep, infiltrate into the Allen Creek drain. Again, the stormwater documents that there is a multi-year Gelman violation of the Allen Creek MS4 permit, and the dioxane plume into the drain is not going to be going away in any time in the near future. Now, the MS4 permit is a federal Clean Water Act permit that's been delegated to the state of Michigan to be administered on behalf of the federal United States Environmental Protection Agency. The state of Michigan issued the MS4 permit to the Water Resources Commissioner, which covers in part the Allen Creek drain. However, when we talk about a violation, the MS4 permit violation is a totally separate federal law violation from what most of us know as the state of Michigan Part 201 contaminated site violations, which you all are familiar with being intervening parties in the court order. So the 2021 court order between the state, Gelman, and their intervening parties is totally separate from this federal MS4 permit violation. The MS4 permit and applicable guidance governing the drain require that Gelman halt any dioxane above background concentrations from seeping into the stormwater. So for our Gelman situation, the appropriate option is to immediately stop the illicit violation by treating it to uncontaminated levels prior to entering the storm drain. And the point of compliance officially is where the dioxane plume infiltrates into the drain. As Commissioner Mitchell was talking about, in January, the Water Resources Commissioner issued a notice of violation to Gelman for this illegal discharge. And Gelman replied with an April 2021 work plan. Unfortunately, it was defective, and the Water Resources Commissioner in June 2021 responded to their work plan, compelling Gelman to provide a revised work plan. The revised work plan was due within 3 weeks from June 3rd and was to address all the problems that were found by the Water Resources Commissioner in Eagle. And they were also directed to complete stormwater sampling of dioxane by October 9th. Unfortunately, they've both missed the revised work plan submittal date as well as the October 9th stormwater quality due date, and therefore they're really in violation of the notice of violation in the MS4 permit. And from my understanding, Evan, currently Gelman has not provided a revised work plan, and that's kind of where we are today on the concentrations of the stormwater continuing to be impacted, as well as not having Gelman being able to be in compliance with the MS4 permit.
So, Dan, before you remove your slides, I think it might be worthwhile for us to have the opportunity to hear from, unless you have some more comments. Do you want to add anything?
That was kind of my that was the 7 Mile High view.
That's good. Great. And I guess, Evan, since right now we have an opportunity to use the maps that Dan has, and I was thinking that might be useful in your discussion, if you wish.
Yeah, I guess we can have that up in case that's handy for folks in picturing anything I go over. So, yeah, I agreed to come to provide an update of where we're at. First off, to kind of pick up where Dan left off, we have not received a work plan from Gelman, but the county's legal counsel has been working with them. They did have a target of getting that to us this week. I was told today that there was a hitch at Gelman's end with their final review, that the consultants done their work, but whoever was supposed to say it's okay to send it over to my legal counsel was out sick. I don't know if that's true or not. We don't have it yet, but basically what I'm told is we'll see it any minute. So that's just that's really the main update to know. Secondly, I came more for an update, not necessarily to debate this, that, or the other. There's a few things that, I feel, and I think I've said it card meetings before, that Dan provides in more or less an absolute and concrete state as far as what's required and what must be and this, that, and the other. And I guess I'm going to just say my understanding from talking with our legal counsel, the attorney general, and Eagle staff many times over time. Eagle called last week to say, oh yeah, sorry, we haven't gotten you a little better clarification. It's not as cut and dry as you might have just heard, if in fact people were really able to absorb all that. I know there's a lot of terminology here. So I'll just kind of keep it as high level as I can and say two things. One, the MS4 regulation regulating keeping contaminants out of storm sewer systems and making the operator of that system responsible for chasing down, I'll say, surprises, has been around for a while. It's been used on things such as PFAS, like with Tribar up in the, I'll say, Wixom area. That was the responsibility of the sanitary sewer folks to take care of that surprise with local enforcement. One of the areas where I would say both Eagle and the Superfund program do not see or haven't given us a clear understanding. I guess all I can understand from those agencies about this MS4 thing, when there is an active site remediation going on, is the rules are different. I can't seem to get to the bottom of exactly what does that mean, exactly what can we require and can't we require, but it seems to me that what I get out of Eagle and the AG's office, as well as Superfund, is that the contamination in the pipe, if it's resulting from an active cleanup, may or may not have certain requirements. So I think Dan, in other documents, has provided a copy of internal Eagle guidance that describes 4 different options that are, one of them is, yes, you've got to get everything out of the pipe that is a contaminant, and you got to stop it from getting in there. But there's actually 3 other options too. One option is kind of related to, hey, make it all go away from the groundwater around the pipe. That's put a hard liner inside the pipe. There you go. There's the documentation. So these 4 things on the bottom. Eliminate the discharge is on the left-hand side as I look at my screen. There's also saying, hey, they could just get an NPDES permit that says up to a certain level. NPDES is National Pollutant Discharge Elimination permit. So that's something that agencies get from Eagle. In fact, the city sewer plant has an NPDES permit, and it says you can't discharge more than this on a daily basis. or more than this on a monthly average. So your monthly average has to be lower than your daily. And in fact, Gelman has an NPDES permit for the discharge of the treated water over at Wagner Road that discharges into a very small creek that's under Eagle jurisdiction. And there's limits to how much they can discharge after the cleanup process, because their process doesn't get it 100% down to zero. But the third option would be, get total uncontaminated discharge, but also you'll see this box in the bottom right here that says, well, if it's part of a contaminated site restoration, they're coming up with additional options. That might be a long-term plan, but the bottom line is what I get out of Eagle is they're not seeing anything that's more immediate and acute. And I think one issue where I've been very clear to Eagle to say, look, I want contamination out of pipe. We all want that. I feel bad when I come and tell groups that's what I want, but the pathway to getting there through the regulatory process seems a little unclear at best. There is an Eagle memo that I provided to Rita that provided some clarification of where their head was at on that. And I guess the only other thing I can say is it's probably not beneficial because Danaher pays people to look for any information that's publicly available that might help them. I'm a little uncomfortable with getting deep into legal strategy, but we have an extremely weak hand. And at the crux of that weak hand is, just whether you put yourself in my shoes or just say any local agency, it's a little baffling to me to say we've got what's effectively, not to be dismissive, but we've effectively got collateral damage from a cleanup program. And if I'm Gelman, I'm sitting there saying, I did everything that I'm required to do for the cleanup program. We did everything Eagle said. If there's a problem, how are we to blame? Likewise, as a local agency, I really do say we've got absolutely nothing to do with this. This isn't a surprise. CARD is documented in writing to Eagle since at least 2010. Hey, we're thinking that this dioxane is moving down to the West Park area. It's going to get into the river. I can't recall if they've specifically said we think it'll get into Allen Creek, but there's a lot of documentation that says we're worried that this is going to happen. It's happened. So from my perspective, I feel it would be unreasonable for Eagle to expect a local agency to spend their money to undo something that got created by an enforcement action by Eagle. That doesn't mean we necessarily have to sit here and do nothing. But if you take a step back and think about what's being asked of us here, it really doesn't seem to be that the local taxpayers should have to foot this bill if there's something more to chase. So I'm hopeful that what Gelman submits to us is acceptable. I do have to say, I might have caused part of the problem by, although I did have legal counsel review the letter that I sent that said, hey, you all need to do a better job with your work plan. That letter did say, get started on what you proposed, because that needs to be done. But I am told now that asking them to go ahead and start doing some groundwater sampling is definitely beyond what we could ask. So I might have scared them away, and I'll take responsibility for that by asking for more than what's required by law. The law and the stuff that Dan showed you basically says that the polluter has the opportunity to figure out what's going on. They use the word characterize the site. So they do have the opportunity to figure out where is this infiltration coming in and at what concentrations, so they can get a better idea of where should we be exploring for heavy concentrations of groundwater. So I'll take the mea culpa for maybe scaring them off and essentially losing 9 months of investigation activity. However, if you look at the Eagle memo that was provided with my correspondence, Gelman certainly needed to do more than say, we're going to go look at where things are coming into the pipe and figure out where that is. They didn't really say, what are we going to do if we find it's really bad somewhere? They didn't get into any of the potential follow-up activities, and Eagle identified 3 or 4 or 5 things that they really do need to address in a revised work plan. All that's a roundabout way of saying we're going to get a work plan. I believe, they've committed to providing a work plan. I believe it's going to have less than what I asked for in my letter. It would be nice if they did a whole bunch more groundwater sampling, but because of the sampling that my office did, and I would say it was, oh shoot, you can't see my cursor on this thing because this is Dan's screen. But there was an area where I was absolutely convinced we were going to find high concentrations of dioxane in the groundwater near Shannon's house in what's called Hanna Nature Area. So that's at the end of Mark Hanna, behind the Salvation Army, near just east of Urbana. I was just certain. So we had samples taken there and we didn't find high concentrations of dioxane in the near surface groundwater. We found 0.44 parts per billion at that location, and we found 0 at West Park when we tested it. So I do feel it is appropriate for them to spend time and energy figuring out where is the mass of dioxane getting into the Allen Creek pipe. To be straightforward with everyone here, having that contaminate, in the pipe itself, on the one hand, I don't like it. And I agree in general with Dan's, statements that say we want it out of there. The law doesn't seem to support us real well there. But quite honestly, the dioxane in that pipe isn't directly hurting anyone. I'm more concerned about that dioxane zipping right down to the river. Are the concentrations going up or down? We need long-term monitoring on all of this stuff. And that's really where Eagle's Head was at too, with feedback and comments of the prior work plan of they need to identify how are they going to do long-term monitoring for this? Because that is kind of one of the options that's open with long-term sites is, well, we're just going to eyeball it. And if the levels are more than 0, we'll just see how they're doing and see if there's anything that should or shouldn't be done. It's pretty fuzzy, quite honestly. It doesn't look like there's any case law out there that said you must do MS4 enforcement if it's resultant from 201 is the gist of it. So I'm not sure all of those words really add up for people. So I probably just need to shut up and see if any folks on the commission have any clarifying questions or what have you. And I do have a couple comments after that, but I need to just stop and take a breath here. That's probably too long already.
Thank you, Evan and Dan.
Evan,
would like...
Rita, if I could just make one point, is that,
Sure.
The MS4 is a federal Clean Water Act permit. And that's completely separate from what we have in front of us in court now, which is a state of Michigan Part 201 contaminated site. In other words, the Gelman site isn't regulated by the federal government at this time, unless it becomes a US EPA Superfund site. Right now, it's in state court. It's a court action generally between Gelman and the state of Michigan. And that's a totally separate process, totally separate violation. It's a violation of Michigan regulations. Whereas the MS4 permit is a federal Clean Water Act permit. And when they violate that, they're violating a federal Clean Water Act. So it's definitely apples and oranges, and they don't mix together to make cranberry juice. They're definitely different things. And I can understand why Gelman would try to put them together, but really they're completely separate violations.
As I said, I'm not here to debate it. This same conversation has come up many times. Dan, I understand you're going to stick to your interpretation, and I'm obligated to stick to what I'm hearing from the attorneys and the fact that the Attorney General does not use the same words as Dan does. That doesn't mean anybody's right or wrong, but it means I have to go with what folks with legal expertise in this area describe. Certainly it's a separate program, but again, the pertinent point here is those regulations, as I understand it, are applied quite differently. MS4 regulations, are applied quite differently when there's an active site remediation causing the issue. So questions from the commission, though? I see Kathy's got her hand up, but I'll let Rita direct traffic as the chair.
Sure. Go ahead, Kathy, please.
Oh, okay. Yeah, as someone who is responsible to my constituents, and for some reason, people in the second ward seem to be very concerned about the 1,4-dioxane. But it seems like we've just gone round and round about what this definition is. And whenever you ask a lawyer, it seems like it adds 2 weeks to whatever process you're working on. So I guess my question is for both of you, Dan and Evan. Given that Congresswoman Debbie Dingell has been very involved in this cleanup, would it be helpful to have her office try to get clarification on this statement? Because she has the resources to do that, so that we're not getting two different interpretations. And I don't know if Dan or Evan want to weigh in on that.
Well, I guess part of my main point is I'm not sure anyone can give a definitive interpretation that will definitely hold up in court. What I've been trying to convey is part of the muddiness is this is not ground that has been tread often, and there isn't case law where an agency took somebody to court and said, you're also violating MS4 in addition to this cleanup we've got going on. And, again, without getting into something that's too helpful to the other side, that lack of case law, given the number of sites that have probably had this issue, is one that does not warm the heart of winning in court if you had to go to court. And again, I'd like to see their work plan and see them take a step forward. But it doesn't seem very winnable. If you wanted a suggestion, one thing would be could sit down with you or another council rep or an EC rep with the city attorney and whatever, the AG or anybody else involved, and have the conversation of how would the city attorney advise council on what's the odds of success if there was a desire to pursue this more vigorously as either its own thing or as part of the existing consent judgment. So that's one idea. Another idea is the Attorney General's office has been very reluctant to put anything writing on this. They consistently say they are working for the folks who do remediation at Eagle. That's not the only group at Eagle. There's other attorney generals that support Eagle. There's also going directly to the Attorney General and saying, why can't this get sorted out? Why can't you just tell us this isn't going to happen, or we can help you make it happen? It's got to be one or the other, right? Either the AG is telling us this is something that you don't have any good legal standing, which is what I'm interpreting, but perhaps they could use a little more encouragement with more vigorously pursuing getting contamination out of a pipe. Those are the two things, and I don't know if Representative Dingell is the best one for that, or somewhere from the city is best for that. Those are two thoughts.
Oh, okay. Why don't we talk about that offline? Because, if you're proposing possibly having a meeting, and I don't care what the path is so much as I just want to have the sense that we're moving forward. And the other thing is political pressure is sometimes helpful. This is an election year. And lastly, on Chapin Street, there is a Black church that has a basement in at least part of its building. And it looks like it's sort of in the path of this dioxane movement. I mean, I'm not a professional at this, but I definitely want to get a better understanding of that, because I don't want to have a public discussion about that or being having reporters ask me questions about it. We need to be as proactive as possible.
Yeah, I'm going to say I'm not suggesting that I'm calling a meeting. That's something you could ask for. When I think of responsibility to my constituents, what I am seeing here, quite frankly, is putting a lot of time and energy into pushing on a rope. And I'm not sure that's the best thing to do for constituents, but my office, the Allen Creek Drain anyway, is almost entirely funded by the city of Ann Arbor. So I will, if the city feels like we want to ramp the energy up, I just want to be clear that you could put a lot of time and energy in. And if there's a feeling that there's some political reason to do that, that's your choice. That's the city's choice. But what I see from the information I hear suggests that if we want to spend lots of time and energy on something, we might focus on the core cleanup and ensuring that continues to go as well as possible, in the circumstance. And I gather that they've started implementing some of that consent judgment for stuff that is over and above what Eagle and Gelman were agreeing to. That started. I don't know if that fixes things or not, but I do know that until things get better in the core, you're not going to see this situation vary other than the ups and the downs. Just because the 2021 sampling showed the first reduction and a notable reduction in the amounts doesn't mean that that's really the trend. It's just one day, one snapshot. So I'd really like to have these folks out here monitoring more, so we've got more to play with.
Right. So, okay. Well, I thank you for everything you've done. I thank Dan Bicknell for everything that he has been doing. And I guess if it's okay, in addition to the resolution, I will take an action item, and I can work with Council Member Dish if she's interested in talking to our city attorney and talking to our city administrator, and letting Congresswoman Debbie Dingell's office know what the status is, so that we can at least move this forward in some way and not just go in this continuous loop. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy and Evan and Dan. And I see you, Lisa, but I saw Chris Graham's hand up first. So I'd like to ask Chris if he would like to make a comment.
Evan, maybe Dan. I'm not a person who ever wants to be in court. I don't think a lot of things that happen in court end up very well. I'm curious to know if either one of you, Evan first, please, has an answer to this problem. Well, let me put it another way. The contamination by this chemical has proceeded inexorably without any constraint for 20 years. Is there truly an answer? Is there a way to fix this? I'm not suggesting who should fix it or who pays or what. Is there a practical way to solve the problem? Evan, and then Dan.
Right. So when you say the problem, are you just talking about the dioxin in the pipe itself right now?
I'm talking about dioxin flowing inexorably toward the Huron River, somewhere near the outflow of Allen Creek, or maybe elsewhere. Is there a way to remove the contaminant from our groundwater? Is there a way to deal with this, in fact? Or are we facing an issue that's insoluble, and so maybe the ultimate result of court action is who pays, but
yeah,
we all are paying.
Yep. Okay, thanks. I just want to make sure I hit the right button. Yeah, I mean, of course, anything's possible with the time and the resources. I have to go back to what a number of people have said over time. The biggest problem here is the law, the Part 201 law, the law that governs site remediation, that was written by lobbyists for essentially polluters. and doesn't require full cleanups. All of that said, I think I fall on the same side as just about anybody in the community, where I see the word prevent in the consent judgment. And I'm right with you, Chris. I don't see a lot of preventing in the long-term history. I hope that some of this consent judgment 4 gets us better prevention. I hope that the EPA, should they take this on, gets better prevention. And that I hope prevention means clean up a lot more mass a lot faster than it has been. So it's possible. I think the law leaves us with dioxane under the ground, even if we get everything we want to at least, the level of 7.2 parts per billion. But it's feasible, it's possible, it's frustrating.
Dan, did you want to
Chris,
comment?
Chris, this is Dan. I mean, this is not a unique problem. These solvent sites are all around the United States and the world. And the solution is to do groundwater extraction. Now, in the proposed 4th amended consent judgment, they're not extracting enough groundwater with enough groundwater wells to have any meaningful impact. And that's why the plume just continues to expand. But if you put in the proper number of groundwater wells and extracted them, then it would halt the plume and restore the aquifer. That's what US EPA in the Superfund program would ask for. And as Evan said, in this Eagle Part 201 agreement, I call it the new 2021 court order, it doesn't require that. It's totally deficient. As a matter of fact, the new court order pumps maybe 12 more gallons per minute than the current order. So that's the solution, though, is to put in more groundwater extraction wells to halt the plume and capture this contaminated water. Don't let it expand. And it's nothing new. It's classical remediation. But Gelman has, as in, I think, with this MS4 permit issue, put up a legal defense and it's not being required.
I think you're probably correct. The number of groundwater extraction wells, the impact on the community of those in all of the locations they would have to occur, is a practical undertaking, or is that pipe dreaming?
No, it's a practical. It can be done. It's not a problem. It's done every day in other sites.
And the cost to doing that, the
$50 million. It was estimated $50 million in a Gelman feasibility study. And they said that it was practical. This was probably 6, 7, well, more like.
Where are we now relative to that?
We're completely different. They went a completely different way. Now, as Evan indicates, they're going for trying to just basically hold the line. But what they have is groundwater monitoring wells and extraction rates isn't going to hold the line. It's going to just let it go by. If I could,
spending a handful of million as opposed to 50 million in order to do what they're doing in the way of extraction.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if I
Lisa?
could just to quickly respond, to give you a visual. Chris, I gave this presentation to a number of units, including Scioto Township, Ann Arbor Township, and I think maybe a little bit in the city. But these are the yellow lines go to where the extraction wells are that are required in the proposed 4th amended consent judgment and in the current court order. As you can see, this is the plume, and these are the extraction wells. Well, down here is West Park. The plume is not going to be captured past these 2 points as it goes towards West Park. There's nothing that stops it. And as a matter of fact, these 2 wells, 19 and 23, haven't stopped the plume from going from west to east. So this is an example of how deficient the system is. And as you can see, beyond these extraction wells, you have all this contamination flowing freely. So that's the basic problem we have. There's not enough work that is being done in the court order to stop the plume from migrating.
I got it. So how do we remedy this shortcoming without waiting for the courts to catch up?
Well, the basic thing is we've petitioned for the United States Environmental Protection Agency to make this into a Superfund site. And if the United States Environmental Protection Agency did make this into a Superfund site, they would compel Gelman to put in many, many, many more groundwater monitoring wells and halt the plume and restore the aquifer for drinking water requirements, which is what they do on most all Superfund sites. But that's different than what is being done underneath the current court order.
I got it. Thank you.
I'd like to let Lisa ask her question.
Thank you. I want to just get clear on, to make sure that I understand. I absolutely want to work with you on this, Kathy. This is really important. And I just wanted to understand the suggestions that we got from Mr. Pratt. So what I have in my notes is that Mr. Pratt advised us to sit down with our city attorney and the AG's office. And I agree with you, Councilmember Griswold, that we should, of course, include the city administrator and ask them how winnable a case would be if we tried to take them, if we took them to court over the stormwater permit. And I'm also thinking that, Mr. Pratt also raised the question whether the regulatory framework gives us a remedy for this seepage into the Allen Creek drain. And so I think that is another question that I would want to hear what the AG's office and our council says. Because if I understood everything that Mr. Pratt said, because the Allen Creek drain is largely in Ann Arbor, if we want to pursue this through a litigation pathway, that would cost us. And it is my understanding that our attorney's office likes to make sure they can win before we embark on litigation. So it'd just be good to hear what they say. That's not necessarily to say that we wouldn't pursue that option. We just want to hear what they say. So did I follow all of that, Mr. Pratt? Did I get it right?
I think so. I don't think I overtly said, I would presume that the county's legal counsel who's spent a lot of time and energy on this one specific issue would be helpful in that conversation. I let him know that I would at least put this out there as a choice. I do not have a problem with the county being in front or behind the city on this one. I just don't feel like it's my place to go start down that path without everybody's eyes wide open. As far as what I've heard so far isn't encouraging, and it is money of city taxpayers. And I got constituents all over the county, and I try to make sure that how I work with my constituent group considers the funding of things all along, because my office doesn't collect any general taxes. It's all based on what happens on this piece of pipe or that ditch or what have you. So just add our attorney is the only thing to add, I think.
And I don't want us to debate this at length because we have already a lengthy agenda, but you have emphasized that our best pathway forward may be aggressive implementation of the fourth consent judgment, which does significantly increase the volume at which the cleanup will proceed from what has been true up to now. Do we need more extraction wells farther east, given the way the plume is moving, as Mr. Bicknell suggested?
I don't have a good background in that hydrogeology thing, but just intuitively, and having read a lot of information with maybe not comprehending 100% of it, absolutely more extraction wells would seem to be a no-brainer as a benefit to the setup. I mean, I laugh at myself, not at the subject matter here, and obviously having them a little further east. The catch is we're not seeing the groundwater in those areas with a lot of dioxin in it once you get past Urbana. Like I said, I swore that there was no way we were going to have anything other than, noticeable, bit higher levels than what's in the pipe is what I expected to find out of the pipe, because there's a fair amount of clean water getting in the pipe. We didn't find that at all. So I'm not concerned about the church. I used to live on Chapin. I know Simone from way back when, and, her dad running the church and everything. I'm not concerned in the least at this time about that, but we need to be keeping track of this stuff on a constant basis, because you missed 2 years and all of a sudden the plume did, crest whatever was holding it back, and it moved along. Now it's been 6 years since Eagle did a fair amount of shallow groundwater monitoring all along 7th, and there was no dioxin found in the groundwater all along 7th, but that was 6 years ago. And as Dan points out, now they did find something in the pond at West Park after not finding it for quite some time. So more extraction wells, the better. Other than that, I don't know the science or the legality behind all that.
Kathy?
Oh, I just wanted to clarify my statement that I am not advocating for litigation, and that would be my absolute last resort. That, more monitoring is definitely, I'm not an expert in this, but again, it seems like that would be money better spent than a lengthy court battle. I mean, we've already seen what happens there. So, okay.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify, I'm bringing up legal things not because of go to court now or go to court later. It's what rights do we have to put out there? As I said, I've learned after the fact that my letter overstepped, the law, and my attorney keeps reminding me, let's just follow the law. Let's just follow the law. I keep reminding him, you took a look at that letter before I sent it. Again, I'm not laughing at the subject matter. I'm laughing at myself. He wanted to be very sure that I was not in a position of having to walk back things that were in that letter. And I feel like I'm in that position, and I feel bad, but I guess I feel better about pushing too hard than not pushing hard enough. So I guess in this case, I'm okay with being over the line, and I hope that doesn't offend anybody. But we certainly need to know what our legal standing is as we continue down a path that probably includes more frustration than satisfaction. But I echo Chris's comments quite a while ago. I know of very few people who ever went to court and walked out and did a joy dance. And that includes people who absolutely had everything clearly on their side by the law, and it just didn't work out. They had a jury that didn't see it the same way or what have you, or a judge that disagreed. We've got a friendly judge, in general, so that's a good thing, but that only goes so far. So I only bring the legal stuff up, and we want to make absolutely sure that everything we do puts us in the best position going forward.
Agreed. I see another question from Chris Graham.
So Lisa and Kathy and the mayor and the council, if you went to Gelman or whomever we're dealing with actually and said, okay, we'll split the cost with you to install 3 or 4 times more extraction wells than you're doing now, will you do it? Of course, the city would have lots of conditions, and no doubt Gelman would have lots of conditions, but what would that cost? Wouldn't it, if an agreement could be made, wouldn't that go a long way towards solving the problem long before the courts solve it? Rhetorical question. You don't have to answer.
All right, I see a hand up with Dan Bicknell. And I think we should just try and wrap up soon.
Yeah, I would just observe, Chris, that the proposed Fourth Amendment consent judgment was as far afield for Gelman as they're willing to go. The Eagle people, the interveners, were not happy with the monitoring wells and the extraction rates, as I understand them, and a number of other things. But that was the offer that Gelman made. So it's very unlikely that Gelman is going to agree to install a bunch of extraction wells if half the cost is going to be on their side of the ledger. That's why I keep going back to, if you really want to change the dynamic here, you need to get the federal government involved and have this become a US EPA Superfund site, because they have the ability to enforce with the Department of Justice and the AG's office a real result. And if Gelman at that point refuses to follow Superfund, remember that there is this, if they refuse to have an administrative order and do this compromise, you have that Superfund in the background that will pay for it, and then we'll sue them in a cost recovery action. So classically, when you get into this situation where you're in with people who like to litigate, you go into the federal government, you get the Department of Justice to help out. In that way, the city and the municipalities don't have to continue to fund, which they're doing now, through the state action.
So I guess the obvious question is, where are we on the request of the Superfund funding?
Yeah, well, where we are is, back in 2016, we petitioned the US EPA to go forward and look at making this into a Superfund site. In 2017, they did a preliminary assessment and they said, yes, the Gelman site does qualify tentatively to become a US EPA Superfund site. And late last year, the governor of the state sent a letter to US EPA saying, we support making this into a US EPA Superfund site. So currently, right now, US EPA is moving forward to make this into a US EPA federal Superfund site. They have people now that are taking additional samples, federal people that are taking samples, and ideally, near the end of the year, they will have collected that data, and shortly thereafter, we'll understand if the United States Environmental Protection Agency is still looking at likely making this into a US EPA Superfund site.
Fingers are crossed. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks. And I guess I'd like to just make a statement that for my part, having lived in town since this has been discovered, so that's like over 30 years, I personally feel a level of beyond impatience and amazement that we've gotten this far without some kind of better resolution. And I'm hoping that we have started some things that are actually going to be effective. And I would like to encourage the continued efforts as they are ongoing. So with that in mind, I did prepare a resolution that I included in the agenda packet that is basically a very much a restatement of what we did last year, which is to support the Water Resources Commissioner, Reverend Evan Pratt, in his efforts at addressing the ongoing MS4 infiltration, which is separate from the EPA approach. And so just to continue that, and Evan, knowing that you're going to get, we hope, a response from Gelman very soon. I know this feels probably redundant, but I would like to ask the group, first off, did you have a chance to look at that resolution? Do you want to look at it? Can we look at it right now? Do we need to? And if so, I'll display it and we can talk through it. Everyone read it? No. Okay. I will need some screen sharing time. And oh my gosh, I think I found it. Can you
Got it.
see my screen? So this is proposals that we address the MS4 permit that is actually managed by the Water Resources Commissioner to address the work that has been started.
Rita,
Yes.
I would recommend, given the time, that we just skip down to the resolve clause because there's
I'm
only
happy
a
to
single.
do that. I just didn't want to. Okay, here we are. Here's the resolve.
Oh, okay.
This is very simple. That the Environmental Commission advises City Council, which is our job to advise City Council, to pass a resolution in support of the Water Resources Commissioner in enforcing the notice of violation in compliance with the MS4 permit that is issued to the Water Resources Commission. And I see two hands up. Chris, you're up first. Or is that from before? Chris Graham? I'm going to skip Chris for the moment and go to Lisa. Your hand is up.
There you go. Sorry. Yeah, I'm just not sure. There's some language in the whereas clauses about how Gelman's not in compliance, and I'm not entirely sure if that's what Commissioner Pratt has told us. They're late, but he indicated that he was expecting their revised work plan. So, I mean,
I think, though, that this is consistent with the kind of thing that you just have described in terms of working with various members of our support on this kind of issue, working with the city attorney, with the AG, with the administrator, that this resolution supports your moving forward in that way. So it's just advising. So we're just advising council to move forward. If there is something you would like to amend in this, we could certainly do that.
I'm just not sure that it's necessary. I think we're going to do this anyway. And this commission has already, provided this advice. So I guess if we want to say it again, I guess there's no harm done.
Would anyone else like to? Okay. Chris Graham, I see your hand raised. And I see John Calvert. Chris, I'm not hearing you.
Okay, so I guess I'm just asking for clarification. It seems like what we did a year ago was to support the issuing of the NOV, and now we're moving forward with enforcing, right? So it's taking the next step after what we did a year ago.
Correct.
Thank you.
I see now Kathy Griswold.
I'm open to amending any of the whereas clauses if Evan Pratt feels anything is out of line or inconsistent with his observations. But I think that the resolve clause is really what's most important, and that is enforcement.
I've not reviewed the document, so I don't feel like I should step in and give a top of mind answer or anything like that. I did not look at this. I mean, the agenda thing just came out recently to us, so I've not had a chance to look at it. I don't want to bind anything up. Or you can table it, and I'm happy to look at it between now and your next meeting, whatever works for you all.
Okay. Chris Graham.
Again, I'm not enthusiastic about more court. It seems to me that something's got to give here. And it's very difficult for a city and a corporation to negotiate once they've drawn lines in the sand.
So in this case, though, we're not asking the city to go to court. We're asking our Water Resources Commissioner to work on the enforcement. And I do realize there's a redundancy to last year. So I'll say this is as an expression of impatience with the situation and support for real for moving forward, because it has been a significant period of time. So I'm open to suggestions.
And I would support that. And if this is not requesting the city attorney to go to court on this basis, then I'm supportive. No. But I think another step is really required, and that is to get to a practical solution inexpensively as possible. And that does not include attorneys. And it probably does include some city expense at helping to solve the problem. And maybe the Superfund thing works out, but that's a ways away, and it would be very helpful. But an overture in the meanwhile might be worth doing. My 2 cents.
Okay. Personally, I would prefer not to put that kind of thing in this resolution. I feel pretty strongly that we've had a long time of working with this company that has created the problem, and we are now living with it. And I personally would like to see them be the responsible for resolving it. So that's my statement. But I'm open to other questions, and if we would like to vote on this, I'm happy to do that. I see 2 hands up again. Chris. Chris, are you intending to ask a?
I'm sorry, I'm not. I forgive me.
That's all right. John?
My personal feeling is that I'm not sufficiently kind of knowledgeable of a lot of the information in the whereas clauses. So I'd like to take up Mr. Pratt's offer to kind of review it, and that we come back to this next meeting.
All right. Is that the wish of the group? Since I can't see everybody, I guess I'll stop screen sharing for a moment if I can figure it out. Stop. There. Hi. All right. Well, I'll just put out a motion. Would the group like to table this resolution for consideration over the next month and bring it back?
Yeah, I move to postpone until the next Environmental Commission meeting.
Okay. Everyone in favor, say a second. Thank you. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Opposed? All right. We will table and bring it back. And I appreciate the discussion. Thank you very much. Thanks, Evan. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, good to hear the discussion.
I'll
check in if there's any feedback on the resolution, but if any members of the commission want to have additional conversation or something, I'm certainly available. I say I can't type my address in the chat, but all our emails are the same at Washtenaw County. It's last name, first initial @washtenaw.org. So I'm Pratt E at washtenaw.org. If anybody wants to, talk a little bit further or say, I don't like this clause or whatever, but I'll just take a look at it and follow up with the chair and the council members.
And I apologize for the late submission or getting it to you. Thank you all. Okay, so we have had this extended discussion, and thank you. Let's move on to, or back to our first item, and I will ask Chris Vandenbroek, I guess, to perhaps do an introduction. Is that acceptable? To talk about, and we're talking about the compost. Is that correct?
Right. I've been curious about compost, and the more I look into it, I get more and more curious. And it turns out there are several agencies that are in the business of qualifying what can be composted and what can't be. And what has become interesting to me is that the Compost Manufacturing Alliance does field testing on compostable items. And Susan Tolman is the executive director of the Compost Manufacturing Alliance, and she tells me that she's in frequent conversation with the managers of our local We Care Denali facility. So I've invited her some time ago if she wouldn't please try and give us a little talk about how this whole operation works. And I see you're still on the line, Susan, so it's all yours. I don't know the technology here. Maybe Galen has to enter in, but it's all yours.
Great. Well, it's a privilege to be here. And part of the important work you clearly do. So I am the managing director for the Compost Manufacturing Alliance, and we just got back from the U.S. Composting Council conference. So unfortunately, I don't have any of the We Care facility folks here, but I'm an extension of them. And really what I do is deal with compostables all over the country for a whole network of composters. So if I can share my screen, is that the plan? And then I'll just go through a quick presentation for you. So good deal here. Just hit the button. Okay. Oops. Sorry, guys. Huh. Oh, there we go. I hit the wrong button. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So we're in an interesting time now where there's a lot of EPR legislation and plastic pollution reduction pacts and all sorts of things to get plastics out of the environment to ensure that we're not, polluting the environment. So what we're seeing is a whole lot of companies and brands and like Whole Foods saying 40% less plastics on the shelf. And what that's doing, though, it's moving a whole lot of interest into the compostable space. So this is a very critical time when compostables become maybe a strategy to minimize plastic pollution, to really be engaged in what compostables are all about, what they mean to successful programs, and how we can actually bring in more food waste, but also make sure that we're not taking the wrong things that would be a problem. So the program, just a little background on me. I work here in Seattle, and I worked on the food waste programs that started back in the late 2000s, and really was part of building the program from the ground up, literally. And we came to a point in about 2009 where, if you're aware, here in Seattle, we have some big companies, big campuses, and everybody's rushing to do compostables. And so we took the standards that were really the historical standards that everybody took at the time, which are lab standards. We took all this packaging, and lo and behold, in a few months, we found that a good over 50% of the items that we were taking in just didn't break down. So there's a reason for that, and that is that a lot of the lab standards that were developed in the 90s, before a lot of the technologies that were built, after that time were actually cited and permitted. So you had standards for basic windrow facilities that might have been running for 6 months. And now you had permitted technology that could process compost feedstock in 60 days. So those compostables that were starting to come into these facilities that were newer technology and higher levels of technology didn't necessarily align well with the original lab standards, which are still the lab standards used today. So we thought that wasn't really sustainable as a company. I worked for Cedar Grove. So we had to come up with our own plan, and we started field testing. So compostables do a lot. Like I said, they minimize plastic pollution. It's a great story to know that if you've got a kids, you've got, food being served at the local school in a compostable, we can take the food scraps in the package and send it back to the local composter and bring it back to put in the school garden. There's more and more science coming out about composting, either applying it or diverting those organics from the landfill, or a big mitigating factor to climate change. And not to mention, if you ever use compost, or if you're a home composter, we know it grows healthy plants and gardens, and we can keep that material in our communities, and we get jobs, and we get just so many. I just can go on and on, but I know I got to keep going. So we are a third-party certifier of compostables from a solid waste perspective. So what happened over the years is all these folks were using the lab standards, and they're good standards. We need those lab standards to be met. The lab standards tell us that they're safe, they don't contain chemicals, that they're not phytotoxic, that they will biodegrade to biomass and water and not simply fragment in the soil and leave behind microplastics. So those standards are still very important, but we're sort of in 0.20 now in this compostable world. And that is, but it also has to work for the composter. So if you think about it, if you have a municipal contract with a hauler, those organics are going to the composter. Someone paid a premium to get a compostable version, only to have it go all the way through the system and end up getting landfilled. We're actually going the opposite direction environmentally on those materials. So CMA has really created a system, sort of like our own EPR system across a network of composters, where we have our own vetting system that goes a step beyond the lab standards. And that's what WeCare has adopted in all their facilities, taking food scraps in their network across the country. So what I like to say is we're taking the supply chain that's making all these great products to reduce plastics, and we're taking the compost facility and the solid waste systems. And I always like to remind the supply chain, if your material ends up in the bin that goes to a municipal composting plant or a privately owned composting plant, we have to be part of the same system. We can't operate as two different systems. So I spent a whole lot of time collaborating with the supply chain and our network to make sure we're co-creating good compost with the right compostables. So what's really happening, and the reason WeCare's adopted this, is the traditional model of the old standard for compostables, one size fits all. You make the product, you pass the lab standards, you put it on the shelf. No one was thinking about the composter all these years. So now we're really creating the space where we all come together and we talk about the lab standards. What do the municipalities need for their education? How about the haulers? And what are we going to tell our consumers? So CMA is really trying to be the place where all those gaps get filled, because we know, I always like to say this to my staff, people don't fail you, systems fail you. So if we don't have the right systems to make this optimal for everybody, we're going to continue to have problems, and people may give up. We don't want them to give up. Compostables have a strategic place out there, and we just want to make sure we create the right systems, the right applications. We are composter owned and operated, I will tell you that, and we put this together about 4 years ago. And so we have the largest composters, some of the largest in the US. Most of them have multiple facilities, are doing hundreds and thousands of tons at their facilities. I think we're collectively just in our membership network, including WeCare, over 3 or 4 million tons just within our network. But we also have affiliates that have joined us because they also want to take compostables, but they want to take compostables that are vetted by the composter. So this is the map of the affiliates that we have. Again, we just came back from the U.S. Composting Council, and this whole program started when I worked with the city of Seattle. When, let's say, a school system wanted to know what can I procure for my school, what works, in my school, at your facility. So we're really list makers at the end of the day. So if you're to go on our website, you'll see this map, and you hover over the city, and that city will give you a link to a list of the products that are accepted at that facility. So at Ann Arbor, we have to add that here, but on the Ann Arbor facility, you would click the link on the map, and that list would show you all the things that have been vetted for their process, which is a windrow process. So I always like to tell people, especially or explain a little bit about the composting process, because our goal is also to mutually educate. You know, we have all these systems going on, and if you look at the recycling commodities over the years and where we ended up, when a lot of things, you know, no longer were being processed domestically and going overseas, and some of the recycling challenges that we've had, we don't want that to happen with composting. We want to make sure that we're being thoughtful and that we're working with you and together. And I always say sustainability is a team sport. It takes everybody to do it right, but a lot of that is education. So we really take our role as educators seriously. So we like to show a little bit about the composting process to help understand why this program's very important. So there's many steps, just like in any manufacturing process to composting. You know, the recovery, the preparation, the actual composting, and the aging. And so it's like a production line. That's why we call ourselves compost manufacturers. We also like to say that we encourage everyone to say, you know, compost manufacturers, because we want to put in people's minds, we're not dumps. We're not places to just throw something. We're actual manufacturers of a product that we want to resell and have a market that will come back over and over again, and also a market that will grow, because if your food scrap program grows, so does your market. It needs to grow with it. So we really are trying to change the, you know, the perspective in people's mind that yes, we're part of the solid waste systems, but we're not a place just to send empty packages just for the sake of empty packages. So we also do a lot of outreach on, you know, what things you shouldn't make compostable, like toothbrushes and cell phone covers and things like that. It's really about a recipe that needs to be consistent. Yard waste, food waste, and compostable foodware. That's really the lane we're in, and that's the lane that we're willing to certify. So when things come in, you know, they're tipped into a building. This is a facility that we work with north of Seattle. And one of the things we're also working on, and we've been successful in my state in passing legislation that actually employs color marking on compostables. Why is that? Well, if you look at this picture, yes, logos are good and how to compost logos are good. But if you're 20 feet up on a loader and you have 1,000 tons a day coming into your facility, you don't know a compostable from an non-compostable. So we're really pushing legislation in our state. Compostables have to be easily identifiable. And they have, and if, for instance, in the grocery stores, you can't have a compostable bag that is, the compostable bags need to be brown or green, but there can be no non-compostable bags that are brown or green. For instance, on the spool in the produce department, and I'm testimony to this. But we used to get a lot of green film. It just started growing and growing. Well, those organic bags are green, polyethylene bags. So we got an ordinance passed in the city of Seattle. We helped write the language for that, and it was adopted statewide last year. And this is now the model legislation for the country that's solid waste based. It needs to be a system that works for a high volume composting site. So we encourage color marking, and we're going to continue to push that type of legislation to keep compost clean. Oh, I went the wrong way. I'm sorry. Just a minute. Let me get back to where I was. Hit the wrong button. My apologies. And I'll just go through the rest of this pretty quick. Yeah, let's pick up here. So at the end of a process, what composters do is they screen out the inert materials and the non-compostable materials. So that might be film plastic. That's the number one contaminant in compost streams is film plastic, again, from produce bags. And go to your grocery store now. And I know when 30 years ago, when I went to the grocery store, there was no plastic on the English cucumbers. There were not strawberries in tiny plastic containers. There were not 1-inch pieces of cake in big domes. There's so much plastic around food now. And statistically, if there's so much plastic around food, you better believe it's going to get to the composter that's taking food scraps. So we're really trying to make things that make more sense to be compostable rather than end up with a whole lot of stuff at the end of the day that ends up going to the landfill and is very costly to the composter. And that pushes your contract rates way up, pushes your residential rates way up. So we got to arrest this now. We got to move the dial backward and have a better system. Materials, after they're screened, they're aged, and then that material goes out to market. And again, if there's flecks of plastic or, bright green tines from spoons or anything like that, that really affects the sellability of that compost. So we're really protecting the aftermarket for compost by making sure we're taking compostables and putting them in a vetted system that makes sense for the composter. What we do is we test different technologies, because not every compost facility is the same. So at Ann Arbor, you have a windrow system. So we do field testing and windrow processes. And those are run with turners and large rows out in the environment. And, and they're basically turned, and those materials go from usually 90 days to 180 days. Our test runs 90 days. So we're being conservative on the lowest time frame that it might go through. In large municipal areas, like in Seattle and New York City, is just finishing building a covered in vessel system. That's the GORE system. That system runs, like I said, it's running now 49 to 60 days. So it's a much shorter cycle, but it's highly controlled, hits much higher temperatures a lot quicker, and it's covered with a fabric that's from the same family of fabric as Gore-Tex. So it's sort of like a live skin and creates a biosphere over that feedstock. And then it automatically aerates. It's all automated, so it's super controlled, very effective, 98% VOC and emission control. So a lot of your large urban composters are going to this very high-tech system engineered in Germany, but you're going to see more and more of these facilities in larger facilities out there. And then finally, aerated static pile often is the technology that a windrow will go to when they start taking food scraps, because you need a higher level of control. For instance, for pathogens that are going to come in from food, you want to make sure you can have that pathogen kill, and you want to make sure that you have enough control to get that. So a lot of the ASP systems are replacing windrows once people go to food scraps in certain states, depending on their regulations, but there are shorter cycles as well. So these are the modern technologies that are used and represent probably 90% of the capacity out there. So we do tests in these three processes with packaging companies, and they get certified for the different process. Once again, our prerequisites are they have to meet the lab standards. I won't go into great detail. We have all this on our website, but they have to meet the lab standards. And we also have a flooring policy. So if you're aware of it, I'm sure this group is. There's a lot of activity going on. In fact, again, Washington State was the first to write regulation that bans any food service sales of products with PFAS. You clearly, folks on this commission know a lot about PFAS in the work that you do. But our policy is we only accept items shown to have less than 100 parts per million total fluorine. We've actually developed the lab standard with one of our advisors who works for ASTM, and we will not accept anything into our program, nor will it be allowed in any of the We Care or CMA facilities in our network. So lab standards plus field disintegration test equals the CMA certification. And I went over a little bit why there's differences between the two. It's really time frame, what the media is. And if you think about a lab test versus a wild, woolly composting plant, you're not going to have the controls you're going to have. The temperature and the time frames and all that are going to be highly variable. So we're really just trying to get in that sweet spot in all these facilities to help packaging companies design what's going to work best in the long run. So this is what field testing looks like, or these are just photos from some of our work across the country where we've gone out and done field testing. We put samples in the pile. We're tracking the temperatures. We're taking feedstock samples to an outside lab and looking at C to N ratios, what was the pH and the moisture level. So we're giving information back. Until CMA existed, packaging manufacturers never knew the science in compost piles, believe it or not. So we literally sit with packaging designers and say, I had a gentleman tell me yesterday, if I knew the pH was 5, I wouldn't have designed my package that way. And I'm not saying compost facilities run at 5, but sometimes we find discoveries about pH and moisture levels and how that affects the the disintegration of those products. We take those out of the piles after they're done at an active composting, and we provide reports back on how they performed. And again, all we're doing is disintegration testing. We're not a lab. We're doing a visual operational disintegration test to ensure those materials aren't left over at the end of the process. So this is just, again, some shots from our work at St. Louis Composting in Belleville, Illinois. And we take the raw feedstock that comes in from the collection programs, and we mix it 80% to 20% products in non-biodegradable mesh bags. We immerse them in the center of the compost piles, and then we pull them out. And yeah, so you can see here, we have a tester putting them in the piles. We put them in the middle of the piles. We have the composters cover them, and then we come back out, extract them, dry them, and put the results together. So we'll literally have pieces of electrical tape which don't biodegrade. So a good test means you just find the tape, and a bad test means you got the whole thing and it didn't break down, or you have, you have a spoon and, it's still 80% there. So if you got a spoon that's 80% there, and you take 40,000, now let's say 120,000 spoons from a Microsoft campus in one day, that's a lot of green flecks and contamination that'll end up. So we have to be very protective of our materials. We have to be very protective of what we send in. This is a report. This is a sample of a report that we might send out to a client, so that you have the before picture of what's a PLA NGO cup, and all that's left after the test in our in-vessel system is the tape. I will tell you, you might be surprised. There's a lot of fiber products, paper products with a lot of treatments, a lot of additives, and fiber and paper does not break down all the time. So we're actually doing a big paper study with big mills. We're going to be doing a fiber study with some top-notch people from some universities, because we want to get to the bottom of how do we get fiber products to, what are the ideal conditions for fiber products to work. And again, a lot of your fiber products now, your clamshells and your takeout containers, they will contain PFAS. So you'll also see that we don't have a lot in that category right now, not because of lack of disintegration, but because they have PFAS, because the industry hasn't caught up with having alternatives to that right now. So keep that in mind. That's a real problem right now. So at the end of the day, we do all that work to make these great lists. And again, it started as a list making sort of activity with the city of Seattle. That list in Seattle that Cedar Grove made that we did was started to get used all over the country. The phone rang one day, and my boss said, he said, "Hey, who are you talking to? Somebody in another state." So I said, I gotta do this thing national. So we just started working with these other composters, and now we have these lists all over the country. So the risks of not field testing, just to summarize, improper breakdown in real world systems could lead to market limitations for composters. So we have a lot of composters that don't know the difference in a pile between a PET cup and a PLA cup that was made to be compostable. Companies that pass field testing usually have a better market opportunity because they're actually connected to the local composter, and we think that's the only way to do this. And if a manufacturer put a lot of money into a lab test and it didn't break down in a compost facility, that wasn't really a good investment if they don't have a home for that. And we're finding more and more composters are refusing to take compostables because they're very uncomfortable with them. So higher landfilling rates from compost contaminants, that adds more cost to the composter and ultimately your contracts. And there's it just creates growing mistrust between manufacturers and composting facilities. So our goal at the end of the day is to protect the investments of our, composters and compost manufacturers and also the product manufacturers, but to protect your investments in your cities, your haulers, your solid waste programs, your education programs. Everybody contributes a lot to make these programs successful. So we're just trying to make sure that we protect everyone's investment and time and do this in a way that makes sense. And what I like to say is we're working from the pile backward to make a difference, to make this a better system. And We Care's all in on this. They've been a wonderful supporter of ours. And that's what the CMA program is. And that's what we're doing. And so it's your local program. And we're here as a resource to you in any city we work with. We work with a lot of universities, a lot of cities. I'm working a lot with counties down in California now with all their new regulations. So we're on the phone a lot, just being a resource, a free resource to any municipality, hauler, government agency, because we're funded. It's kind of like DPR. We're funded by the packaging world to make a better system for everybody. So that's what CMA is about, and that's what the program is. And that's not my name because I got the wrong slide on the end, but you have my name. So that's what I have to share tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. I really appreciate it. And then maybe there's some questions. I got some, but I'll leave it to other people first before I weigh in.
John Calloway.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just wondering either if our guest speaker or anybody else has updates on the PFAS within Ann Arbor's compost stream, because I know the community garden I was involved in stopped ordering from them 2 years ago out of fear of contamination. So I don't know if we've got any more up-to-date information on that or not.
I do not. Does anyone know where we would go for the information? I guess
so the speakers
we care.
Does Susan have any information about the Ann Arbor testing?
And I am not representing the facilities tonight. Unfortunately, I apologize. I would not, but Rod Tyler at We Care could probably give you an update.
Thank you.
I
guess. Go ahead, Chris.
I have a fundamental one, and that is, as a resident, we just had some takeout food from a restaurant tonight, and it came in a clamshell labeled World Centric. World Centric apparently makes a lot of stuff, and it says compostable on it, but I don't see any special color or any special certification or anything on it. And I'm wondering, as a general rule, what should a resident do when he gets a load of food from a local restaurant and the little straws and the plastic cups and all this stuff all say compostable on it? What should I do with that stuff? Should I throw it in our compostable bin or should I throw it out?
Well, certifications are important. Ours and BPI is the other certifier, very well respected and recognized. And again, our policy is CMA only certified for the lab, for the field test portion. But, it takes a little work. I'd go to the manufacturer site, the World Centric site. I'd make sure that's PFAS free, because that paper looking clamshell, make sure it's PFAS free first. But compostability, it may not always have a logo or a certification on the item, but the websites usually tell you if they're certified. So and again, that's where our system is now. The goal is down the road, we should have the right logos and the right color marking to really make this system, legitimate in terms of what's compostable. But our site, and you can also send us lists, on items, not that your homeowners are all going to be calling us, but our lists are great resources. And I found in Seattle, it was really cool. We went to the college and we almost had compost police out there when we got started. Once we had the list, they're like, you're not using the right stuff. And it was like, they were like my police, all the college kids. So they did a lot of that work for us. But once you're educated, the key is education. And any follow-up, we're always happy to do a webinar for the community for you, or record something to help your residents understand and understand what's compostable and what are the things you can look for and where you can go to find out.
I think that's a tall order for most people. I have neighbors who don't really care, and they're not going to make the phone call. So my advice to them has been, up until today anyway, is if you don't really know, throw it out. And it seems to me the restaurant owners who peddle this stuff, they ought to be making a phone call and making sure that if the clamshell that they deliver their food in says compostable on it, that it really is compostable in our windrow. Seems like, but.
Well, the other thing I want to add, there's legislation in Maryland, Washington State, and California now that you cannot put compostable on it unless it passes the lab standard, unless it passes that ASTM. So if they have compostable on it and there's the size of World Centric, it at least meets the lab standard. So I think you could use that as a baseline. Not that that's easy to explain to a resident, but I would say compostable on an item probably means they don't want to get sued or be in trouble with any of those 3 states. And that's, California, they sell a lot of compostables. So, and they're going to harmonize to do that all across the country. Just because California does it doesn't mean they're just going to make it for California. They're going to harmonize the production of those things. So if it says compostable, it has to be compliant, but that doesn't mean it will be compliant. I'm just saying that most companies won't put compostable on it now because of that legislation unless they meet that standard.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. It seems like there are 2 things that that you're describing. So compostable really means the breaking down into like the smallest pieces, right?
Well,
and
really
then
break it down to biomass and water, because oxo biodegradables are fragmenting. Yeah.
Right.
Those are
And
not
so,
what you want.
Sorry? The last
No,
thing you
I said you don't want oxo biodegradables. I always like to warn about oxos. They fragment, but compostable means it biodegrades to biomass and water.
Right. Okay. So biomass means that it's something that's other than PFAS as one of the components?
Well, interestingly enough, PFAS were not part of the ASTM standard. So until PFAS became a big issue in about 2017, they weren't considered, that wasn't considered in what was termed certified compostable. But once that became apparent that it was an issue, now both the certifier BPI and CMA has a PFAS limit in certification. It really is all about certification. The 2 certifying bodies in the country, us and BPI, that's our standard. We're kind of like the gatekeepers on what's acceptable. I don't know if that addresses your question or comment, but there are lawsuits now that are addressing the fact that because there were PFAS in items sold, now lawyers are going after those companies that made those products with PFAS and saying you misled the public because PFAS is not compostable. So that is a development that's kind of, I get your thinking, but that people are also thinking that way, and now there's lawsuits against those companies.
So I think the question really is like, how reliable for us in our city are the indicators that say compostable? And are we making things worse if we put some of those containers in our compost? And it sounds like yes.
I would say fiber plates and deli wraps, the paper deli, are the 2 ones I'd worry about. The rest are pretty good. In fact, I'd be happy to follow up with Chris on articles. The CEH down in California has a wonderful list of resources to help better understand, this whole area of PFAS, what is and isn't. And they do have tests that they did at Berkeley, I believe, on a lot of different products out there in the market. And those are the main ones: French fry bags, deli wraps, and the fiber containers. And that's unfortunate because whole school programs need that tray. So we're really scrambling right now for alternatives, but at least you can take those categories, those subcategories, and say, yeah, I'd be wary of those subcategories. I would agree that I would be wary of those categories.
The things that they wrap sandwiches in, those papers.
Things that yes.
Yeah.
Sandwiches,
okay.
Sub sandwiches, yes. Ask if you go by, ask them, is that PFAS free?
Yeah, it feels to me like we really need to start at a very high level, at the manufacturing level, right? So that the restaurant owners even don't have to think about it so much, that they want to just get the food in a thing and then get it out to somebody who wants it. But it would be easier if they didn't have to think about PFAS or whatever else might be something that would be incorrect to use. Okay, thanks. Does anybody else have a question? Comment? I really appreciate this presentation, and Chris, thanks for making the effort to reach out to Susan and bring this information here. I think it gives us a lot to think about. Chris, are you raising your hand?
I am.
Okay.
So thank you for the PFAS thing. One doesn't see that. Elaine and I have a vegetable garden, and I generally recharge it every year with leaf humus, or what I call leaf humus, from Ann Arbor's Compost Center. And it really works, but I'm not happy if it has PFAS, any of the zone of those chemicals in it. And so I'm glad you're watching that. I also build gardens for a living, and one of the problems I face in doing so is when I need topsoil. A large percentage of the suppliers of that are providing me with soil scraped off farm fields before they get built upon. And as many of you know, most of those farm fields have been growing European weeds for decades. The soil is full of weeds, basically. And so I've gotten around that by making my own soil. And I do that by mixing the city's leaf humus from the compost center with sand or bark, and end up with a soil mix that's probably not very good, but way better than buying farm field soil with all the weeds in it. And so I'm wondering how widespread your pH testing is. In one of those acquisitions, I went to a compost center up northwest of Detroit and bought compost that was very alkaline, because they were predominantly composting leaves from streets. Ann Arbor has typically been pH neutral because they're taking a lot of wood that tends to even out the alkaline leaf inflow. Is pH testing really a significant part of your program? And if it's not, can it be, for those of us who depend upon compost for making soil in our gardens, in our landscapes?
Okay. Very, very good question. I appreciate it. So there's two places good composters are testing unrelated to us. So they have to get the recipe right to make good compost. So they do what are called feedstock tests. When all the material comes in, they do a composite sample and they send it to the lab to test all those things. And there's a range that's promulgated by the U.S. Composting Council that they want to be in. And all the facilities we work in, we pull a feedstock test for our test. And I can tell you that most of the facilities that we operate in are in that range, because if they weren't, they wouldn't make good compost. Okay. So from the standpoint of our network and what we're doing, those are the best practices at the facilities. There's also the STA program the U.S. Composting Council has, and that's a program that you have to certify your compost meets certain standards. Okay. So those standards are also extensive lab tests, TMEECC lab tests. You go to U.S. Composting Council site and look at the tests and the methods that they use, but they also have to meet those standards. So there are some QCs in place, best management practices that composters use. That doesn't mean you're not going to end up with a composter or a compost somewhere that might be out of range. And that's really, I don't represent one individual site tonight, but that's really a facility by facility situation. But I can tell you, at least to give you some assurances, that composters that are doing it well are going to do that anyway, because that's going to be important to making the good compost and selling it, if that's helpful.
It is. I just have to be careful about who I buy from.
That's it.
And I've been so thrilled about Ann Arbor's program, because the product out there has typically been outstanding and pH neutral. The other thing I find when I buy compost is a lot of small non-biodegradable plastic scrap. I can put a 3 or 4 inch coat onto my vegetable garden and rototill it in, and up comes dozens of little plastic, non-biodegradable plastic. I think a lot of it's vinyl, but so are they screening, state-of-the-art screening equipment really getting down to that level yet, or are we still struggling with that problem?
I think it's still an issue, and usually to sell product that's going to actually be applied in, there are specs on product, right? Screen size and all that. I would say most facilities are screening to 1/4 inch to 5/16 of an inch. But again, it's going to be inherent as long as there's contamination in the bin. So I go upstream. Everything, we got to get upstream. We got to get better education.
Yeah.
Can we use compostables as a replacement? I spoke last week at a big conference, said, why don't we make salad bags compostables? Forget the hairbrushes, the salad bags. Can we use that to actually reduce our contamination? Can we use compostables as a contamination reduction strategy? So, but yes, it's going to be there. I was the sales director of compost for years at Cedar Grove. There'll always be a percentage as long as we're taking it from the public. If it was clean every day, we wouldn't have that problem. But I can tell you that there's a lot of people that see a lot of money to be made if we can really get those little tiny pieces out. So we're hoping that technology will bring that, but I'd rather see it never go there in the first place.
Yeah. Well, we have the same problem with the regular recycle bins, with people putting all of their paper products and so on that are definitely recyclable in a plastic bag and putting it in the recycle bin.
Right.
Not good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we are at 9 o'clock, and I just was, does anyone else have other questions? We really appreciate hearing from you, Susan. It's really good to think about what's going on with compost. And Chris, thanks. This was really very helpful and thought-provoking for me and how we move forward. So if no other questions, I'd like to move on to our next presenter and to say thank you to Thea Egerbont for sticking around for this long. We got our agenda moved around quite a bit this time. And looks like Shannon, do you have a question?
I'm just wondering, can we just think big picture about what we really have in front of us tonight? Because it just seems completely unrealistic to me that we're going to be able to cover everything in the agenda that we have.
I can tell you that the next two are going to be super short after this presentation. One is going to be deferred, the KI discussion completely, because Steve was going to manage that and he's not available tonight. And there's another super short on the deer call. So I believe that if we can get through this presentation, that we'll have a relatively short remainder of the meeting.
Okay, I just would like to consider, I would just like to consider tabling some things. It just feels like if we're really
that's
efficient,
really what I'm
it's
telling
be another 45 minutes of a presentation plus 2 other. I just don't want to do things that I feel like we are being cursory about because we just want to get through it fast because it's getting late. So
these are things that you wouldn't have known that happened, and so they will be short.
Okay.
Subsequently,
I would love to wrap up by 9:30. That's right. Just in terms of, so we're supposed to be until 9. So I just would like to think about our overall approach for how we think about agendas, because this just feels like no matter how we slice it, this just had too many things on it. So I know you suddenly got catapulted into the chair position today, Rita. And so this is all because Stephen called in sick today, but I just want to just be mindful about our time in terms of evenings and things like that too. So I just want to put that out there.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to proceed? Thank you.
I can share my screen if you're ready for me, and I will be short. Let's see. Can you see my presentation?
We can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Slideshow here. So I'm Theo Argamont. I'm the Washtenaw County Public Works Director. I'm also the manager for WARMA. And Stephen just asked me to give you a quick overview of what WARMA is, some of the who-hows, and what we're working on. So WARMA formed in 2019. It's a solid waste authority. And Ann Arbor was at the table as part of the formation with staff members present who provide a lot of input. And then Ann Arbor did not join at that time. Your city council decided to hold off, but they have decided to join recently. We've been working over the last year to get all the approvals because it takes a long time to amend our articles of incorporation. And we just had the notice published in MLive on Sunday. And so we just have to file it with the Secretary of State and the county clerk, and then it's official. So you will soon be a member of WARMA. So just to give you an idea of who's involved, City of Ann Arbor, Dexter, Ypsilanti, and Saline, as well as the townships of Ann Arbor, Pittsfield, Ypsilanti, and Scioto. Together, when Ann Arbor joins, they'll make up about 5/7 of the county population. The goal of the short-term goal that the WARMA members have agreed on, and this comes from our strategic plan. We created a document that's a working document that outlines what our strategic plan goals are and how we're going to accomplish those. And so the first one, education-based, we're working on increasing the quantity of quality recycling through analyzing data, standardizing our communications and media outreach, and implementing a cohesive and comprehensive media campaign. And we've done a lot of that, accomplished a lot of that by applying for grants, which is great because it's a very affordable way to do a lot of education. But we've also partnered with nationwide organizations that have a lot of know-how in how to change behavior and improve the quality of the recycling stream. So long-term goals, looking at analyzing and pursuing collective contracting for recycling services as a group for member communities, and also monitoring and supporting regional full-service drop-off stations to increase recycling access. And I just want to note that we just at our most recent meeting on Monday started looking at what would it take for us to have some kind of common contract together, and that's an opt-in process. So right now it's more of a thought experiment of what are the services that municipalities would like to contract for together, and then how would we go about doing that, and what would the savings be? So just one thing that we've talked about since we have been working on increasing the quality and quantity of a recycling stream, we all send our materials to the same MRF and then get a long-term contract with that MRF in order to get some kind of discount, even if it's a couple percentage points. So that's one idea of what we'd be looking at. Just to give you an idea of what we've been up to lately, we, through the grant that I mentioned, reduced the recycling contamination for WARMA communities from just under 20% to just over 11%. So it's a 42% reduction. We gathered a lot of data, and so we know what each municipality's contamination rate is. We know what material makeup they have for their recycling, and we also have a lot of household data, household level data of what kind of contamination we have. So we can do some very targeted outreach in the future. We also provide a lot of education to residents. So through these campaigns, we were working to get plastic films and bags out of the recycling stream. And so we've made some great $1,000. In your packet, it says 144. We had applied for 144 and got 137 to continue to reduce contamination and increase the capture of recycling. And I'll note that we applied for that grant with the assumption that Ann Arbor would be a joining member of WARMA. And so the majority of the grant funds are actually going to be targeted towards the Ann Arbor community. And I'll go through what just a little bit about what that looks like. So I'll start with what we're going to work on next or this year. First, we're going to learn more about collective contracting. Our attorney, Bob Davis, works for a different authority as well and has had some success there. He works for SACRA, Southern Oakland County. So look at common contracting. And then we're going to prepare for the grant. We're going to look at what materials we need for to do our education outreach campaign and get that underway. May through June, we're going to launch. Ann Arbor, you're first up because we want to run you through the grant that the rest of WARMA ran through last year. I'll include more detail on that next. And then WARMA as a whole, with Ann Arbor included, is going to go through the App to Action grant. And what that does is it takes all the data that we gathered during the grant and then uses that data to target our goals. And the WARMA board will decide what those goals are. Most likely going to be related to either reducing contamination more or trying to get those people who are not putting their cart out to the curb to start recycling. So last slide here, just a summary of what the audit will look like or what the grant will look like for Ann Arbor. The first part is we do an audit. We look at what does your recycling look like? How much contamination is there? And they actually sort out, they pull a couple, I forget how many samples it'll be, but it's probably like 5 or 7 different trucks from different parts of Ann Arbor. And then they'll sort those, or they'll take a sample from each truck and sort it into 30 different categories and say, okay, here's how much contamination you have. Here's how much cardboard you have. Here's much other materials, different types of plastics and whatnot. So once we have that data, then we send out the information about here's what you can recycle. Here's what the program's going to look like. Let people know, do a lot of education and outreach. And then we actually send, they've been called recycling detectives to stop by. So they walk up and down the streets. They just open the lid, see what's on top. If there's contamination that's visible, they'll mark what it is in the particular category. And they move on to the next place. And then they, I guess they punch it into their phone of here's what contamination was found or no contamination, and then they move on. And then after that, there's another audit to see what kind of outreach or what kind of impact the outreach and education had. So that's the overview. And it's just for single family homes. So there's something like 26,000 single family homes within the grant. So with that, I'll turn it over for questions. Chris?
That's great. So one question I have comes from looking at the training video from the U of M for what can be recycled. And the U of M has, I don't know whose trucks, but it all goes to your MRF, which I think is located north of Chelsea, right? And there's little itty bitty differences, and I hate to be picky, but for example, the U of M training video says you very carefully take all the caps off your bottles because we don't want the caps mixed in and it's a contaminant. And the Ann Arbor, which is, we have our own MRF, they say, well, keep your caps on the bottles because that way they won't get mixed up and lost. So there's little differences, and I'm wondering if part of your program, you're going to do outreach and get everybody on the right train, but what's the chance of getting, because your MRF is not that far removed from our MRF, are the resulting materials more or less the same? And can we harmonize those so everybody's marching to the same drum? We got the University Island, and then am I in part of the university, or who picks up my stuff? And have I asked a question? Or I'm rattling on.
Sure. So I can start with WARMA doesn't have a MRF. I think you're referring to Western Washtenaw Recycling Authority, which is a separate authority, which includes like Chelsea and others. So I'll start with that. but they're also going to be running a similar program to reduce contamination. But as far as getting the information out regarding differences, we send a mailer to the residents that includes what is and what is not recyclable. It's not going to get into the level of specificity of things like putting the caps on or taking them off. It's really focused on the bulk of people who are trying to do better and are going to spend just a little bit of time looking at it, but we're not aiming to reach those folks who are the 20% super recyclers that are, looking for those kind of specific differences. We will end up hitting some of those things because we have a hotline, people call in, and then we can answer those questions and we can start to try to reach that. But we're really trying to get that bulk of material that people just they aren't quite paying attention. And so we're trying to make that material more available. But to your question about there are little differences. So, we ran through this program last year, and City of Ypsilanti did not take glass, whereas the rest of the Warma communities did take glass. And so we had to specify that on all of our outreach materials. And part of Warma's goal is to have a common collectible list of recyclables that works for all communities within the borders. And one of the ways that we can achieve that is by sending all of our materials to the same MRF. And so when I mentioned that common contracting, that would be one of the major benefits, is all of our educational materials can be the same no matter where you're at.
Thank you.
You bet.
Lisa?
I'm not sure who had their hand up next.
Let's go
Yeah,
with Lisa.
I was wondering, you mentioned collective or collaborative contracting. Is there any likelihood that you might use Ann Arbor's MRF?
Yeah, so right now, one of the things I'm working out is where do all of because a lot of things have switched in the last, 2 or 3 months since the Ann Arbor MRF came on board. And so I'm following up with haulers and with municipalities. But I get the notion that at least 5 of the 7 current Warma members likely send their materials to the Ann Arbor MRF. So some of this is going to, it might be an easier push than we think.
John?
Yeah, just a
Howard?
quick thank you, Theo, for this. I'm just really pleased that we're at this point. I think it was just 2 years ago, the commission was kind of stuck of how to get Ann Arbor into Warma, and here we are. So thanks for your update, and just very happy that our persistence has kind of moved us forward. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for those of you who were on the commission at that point for the multiple resolutions I believe you passed to help with that process.
Kathy?
I wasn't on the commission then, but I do remember that unionized labor was an issue. And can you just give us an update on that, where you use unionized labor and where you don't?
Yeah, so it's completely up to the municipality for what they put out for contracts or not. So Warma has no authority over who you would use for anything unless you grant Warma that authority. And so the way that the collaborative contracting process would work is that the city would contract with Warma, and then Warma would contract with some kind of larger, some kind of hauler or MRF. So, for example, if we were to do collective contracting, we would start with asking the city of Ann Arbor, what would you like to have for services to be put out to bid? And most likely you would say, well, we have trash that's hauled with unionized labor within our organization, within the city of Ann Arbor's public services. So we're not even going to put that out to bid. And then we'd say, okay, great. So you're interested in recycling services to put out to bid. What are your requirements or particularities of, you have a living wage ordinance. So you'd say, okay, we're going to put that out to contract. here's what the requirements are for that contract if you have to meet these standards. And then the benefit of it is if you have a neighbor that has a similar requirement as you now have an economy of scale. So by putting it out there, you also, haulers can transfer over borders more seamlessly, and so they can optimize their routes. And now you save greenhouse gas emissions because you have a very efficient route going back and forth. So that's what we're trying to take advantage of here. But it all starts with the city saying, here's what we want, here's what our requirements are.
Okay, and could a requirement be unionized labor?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So I'm acutely aware that our time is moving on. Are there other questions on this particular topic with the WORMA? I really appreciate you staying this late, Theo, and thank you for that presentation. It's great to see that we're making this progress.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So with that, I'm going to move on to just briefly say that we have on the agenda emergency KI distribution, which is potassium iodide, which was addressed by the Environmental Commission a couple of years ago. And apparently it has not moved forward. And Steve was going to lead that discussion tonight and had some additional information. So I'm going to specifically say that we'll defer this to a future meeting since he is not here. We have our next item on the agenda under new business was a referral, or it's a referral from the City Council about discussions with the University of Michigan for housing units for workforce housing, specifically on U of M North Campus. I would appreciate some discussion from Council Member Griswold, who was involved in initiating this, and perhaps we can figure out a plan for moving forward with this particular item.
Oh, okay, thank you. I see this as a multi-month review. I haven't had a chance to talk to Missy Stoltz yet. And if there is anyone on the commission that is interested in this and would like to talk to me more about it before the next meeting, I would welcome that discussion, but I don't want to take a lot of time tonight because it is getting late, and it's going to be a multi-month process. In introducing my resolution, though, it was really very general, with the idea that the commissions who were touched by it, be the Transportation Commission, the Planning Commission, Economic Development, and Energy Commission, that they would provide some data and metrics to support this coordination. And in talking to Derek Delacourt, these types of discussions have been going on with University of Michigan staff. However, we've never had any policy direction on this topic. And so that, I don't know if that answers any questions, but it's really just the beginning of a discussion, and it's going to take, I would say, many months before we're able to have a city council and regents discussion about this. We've tried to have meetings in the past with the regents, and with COVID, they just continually get, it's been years now, they just get bumped down the road until we have a healthier condition, and that hasn't happened.
Okay, it looks like Chris Graham. Sorry, I just see your hand.
Lisa, this is suggesting that people who work for the university as staff have housing provided in some way, I presume for rent, but by the university?
It could be by the university.
Right,
it could be co-op housing, because the part of North Campus, there's some land along Green Road. It could be sold to a private developer. It could be a 99-year lease to a private developer. there are many options, and I'm not a housing expert, so that's one of the reasons that I think it needs to go to staff and to the commissions to see what's feasible and what is going to be most effective in terms of our 820 goals.
It probably is true that most people who are staff at the university are driving in from out of town.
Some even from Detroit.
Or Bay City, or whatever that study showed, that people coming more than an hour away to work here. Thank you.
The university has home zip codes for all employees. So again, it's a very complex issue, but I think that we should at least start the discussion.
Shannon?
We talked about it a little bit at Planning Commission, and one of the comments from the planning manager was that I bet many commissions are going to want to meet with U of M. And so there might be some, if there's going to be, maybe there's some sort of coordinating something that can happen with meetings between some of the various commissions and U of M. So they're not meeting with every commission. So I just ask that if that is a next step in any part of this, that we might think about how to make it a more streamlined.
Okay, thanks. Yes, and right now city staff meet with university staff on a quarterly basis, including the university planner, Sugat, and others. And I just received the minutes from that last meeting. So I would expect that the city administrator would coordinate any such meetings. And I'm not sure who else we might want to include. Are you thinking about like experts in sustainability at the U, or?
I was just thinking that if each commission is interested in meeting with representatives of U of M, that perhaps there could be some sort of collaborative setting where several of the commissions meet at the same time, so that it's not them, going to every commission, I guess is what I was thinking, if there's some way to do some sort of joint something.
Okay.
So it's just a thought.
Good idea. I'll ask the city administrator to coordinate anything like that. And so that commission members aren't dealing directly with the University of Michigan. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, and I know that the planning director was going to be reaching out to them, Brett Leonard. And so you might even talk with him or something like that, to just so that it's a more coordinated response.
Oh, okay. And I know that Brett is part of those quarterly meetings already.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for the idea.
Is there, any other questions in particular? I guess my question is, how do we want to go for tonight in terms of closing? Do we want to suggest a work group or sending you questions, Kathy, or what would be a best way for our commission to proceed to potentially contribute to moving forward on this issue?
I guess if anyone has any suggestions for me or questions, just send them to me and I will respond to everyone. I don't want to create a lot of administrative overhead at this point, but I want to make sure that anyone who's interested feels included.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So send your questions to Kathy. All right. So our next item on the agenda has to do with the Deer Call resolution, which we passed last month. And it's back on the agenda today. And I recall that Lisa sent me some information about the Deer Call as a potential, instead of having us vote on it again, that's not the intent for tonight. But if I could ask you, Lisa, to comment on some of the thoughts that you had with moving forward with this.
So anything having to do with the Deer Call needs discussion with city staff. And so that has to happen. Budget discussions with the city are starting really soon. And if we want to get the Deer Call into consideration, something's got to get to council fast. those two statements are in tension with each other. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm trying to get a meeting with Mr. Delacourt, who reached out to me and is willing to talk about it. And so that's all I can say. I really, right now, I don't know exactly what to say. The Deer Call resolution that Environmental Commission passed is not going to go to council in the form that it was written. In part because of the form in which it was written. It's just written in a way that we don't typically write them. And it asks for city council to ask for the call to be resumed and funded. And that is, I don't think that's the best way to go, because I'm afraid that's just going to get voted down. I think what we want to ask for is that consideration of resuming funding for the cull and the trade-offs of that with other funding priorities gets into the budget discussions for this time around. Because, this isn't the big budget year. We're in the second year of a 2-year budget. And so it is difficult to change the budget. And last year, council voted very deliberately to take the Deer Call funding out, which neither Councilmember Griswold nor I supported. So we will do our best, but I think it is pretty unlikely that anything on the Deer Call will come back to EC to vote again on. You voted a resolution. We voted to approve a resolution that expresses the spirit of EC's support for not making a big darn pause in deer management, right? And so whatever Councilmember Griswold and I are able to bring to council will be noted and in the spirit of what you all said, but probably not to the letter of the EC resolution. And I really hope that we can get some staff mobilized and supporting us so that we can get this into the budget discussion.
Thank you. I think that does address the approach that we wanted, which is, well, our mandate, which is to advise council. And so taking that forward is something that I very much appreciate. It is one of the issues that I'd like to see us move on. So looks like Chris Graham has a comment.
So is it both of your opinion that there aren't the votes on the council to proceed with the request of the Environmental Commission at this time?
If you frame it as voting to agree to fund it, which is a kind of pre-commitment before we've seen all of the things that are on the table for this budget, for this second year reevaluation of the budget, I think that would be very difficult to get the votes for. Because it's not even the snow sidewalk thing that we voted on in the past meeting was worded in that way. Let us consider it in our discussion of all the priorities that we have on the table for this budget. And so I think that is the way people are feeling good about supporting things right now.
So should we, or some of us who are on the proponent side of this, be meeting with city staff or with council members?
No, just I will be meeting with Mr. Delacourt. If Councilmember Griswold wants to join me, she will. I don't even know when that's going to happen. Did I say the wrong? I'm sorry, I'm really tired. Did I say that I was going to meet with Mr. Delacourt, or did I say I was going to meet with Councilmember Griswold? I don't know.
Delacourt.
Did I say the right thing? Okay, good.
Delacourt, yep.
Yeah. So it would not be. There's no need for the commission to lobby at this point. It's really, it is a better process to consult staff before voting on resolutions. So we're kind of backing up the process. It is great to have the EC support and to be able to claim that the EC is concerned about a longer pause of deer management. All of that is excellent. And I'm really grateful for the work and thought and support that you all have. And so now we'll hope that we can work with staff to produce something that can come to the table.
I'm kind of worried that it wasn't, I mean, in the last budget go around, staff was fully supportive of continuing deer management, and the council voted it down.
Aware.
I assume council is going to change next November, but that doesn't get us very far in this coming fiscal year's budget discussions. Is there any sign that any council members are amenable to discussion about this matter? We might be able to go another year before the deer population really begins to get ramping up fast again, but we can't go 2 years more before they really begin to bite, quite literally.
So I would suggest that we wait until we are in a budget discussion, and at that point, your lobbying efforts would probably be most effective, but not at this time.
So will you let us know, please, when we can be of help?
Yes.
We can, I don't mean we, the Environmental Commission, there are other people interested. We can push as constructively and as positively as we can.
Okay.
I'd like to suggest that Chris's comment shows the urgency of concern, as well as the unanimous passing of the resolution by the commission. So I hope that's useful to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, this is a tough problem. It shouldn't be.
So with that, we will leave the resolution in your hands, your capable hands, council members, and thank you for moving it forward and supporting our recommendations. All right, I'm going to try and do a speed round of, maybe I should just ask, of any of the standing committees, the work groups, are there any particular reports out that anyone would like to make of, I'll just go through them quickly, natural features?
Well, you'll be pleased to know that 2 or 3 sections of amendments to the UDC got discussed today with a couple of members of the committee that are working on that. You'll also be pleased to know that there was a Michigan Association of Planning webinar a couple nights ago discussing woodlands ordinances across the state and how not to do things and how to do things. One of the court cases involved in that is in Ann Arbor Township. And there's a petitioner up there who does not want to comply with any aspect of the Ann Arbor Township code that requires work on natural features as a part of the petition. And the courts have resoundingly denied his claim. Ann Arbor Township's ordinance is substantially based upon Ann Arbor's that we wrote 20 years ago. It suggests that you should have a master plan that fully defends your point of view about protection of natural features. You should have a code that does what ours does and theirs does, which says, as a part of your petitioning process, you should minimize the effect or impact on natural features in a development proposal. It does not say you shall not. It says you'll minimize. The code says there and here that you will provide, as part of the planning process, alternative plans to show that you really truly have studied how to minimize the impact on natural features. Each part of the code describes very clearly why each natural feature is important in enough detail to say to a judge, you've really thought through this, you really know what you're doing, you've really exacted a reasonable level of regulation on your petitioners. And I'm very proud to say what we did 20 years ago is standing up where a lot of places are not. As you know, we're trying to work on increasing protection for trees in Ann Arbor. And I'm hoping we finally get through this process to be able to do that and still have very great success in the courts if we ever have an issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Lisa, did you have something you wanted to? Okay, thank you. I'm going to do a quick one on pollinators. I am working with the pollinator work group to provide some really interesting updates to the city's website and perhaps a connected one in the future. And I want to announce that you all are invited, and I'll ask Galen to send out a link to a 2030 district session that will be held next Tuesday, February 8th from noon. It's a lunch and learn session on native landscapes and green infrastructure, for which I recruited some really great speakers, David Mindell from PlantWise, Katie Wittachak from the county rain garden program, and Brad Smith, who is a U of M professor who created a prairie in his backyard, and they'll show the transformation. Our goal is to get and inspire larger landowners that attend, or developers that attend these kinds of sessions, to see if they will switch over or install native plantings in their space. So that's something that I'm pretty excited about. So the next group, zero waste. Any reports on zero waste? Nothing to report. Okay.
There are things to say, but it is 9:41, and I
right.
see a lot of really tired faces on this screen.
Okay. Construction, demolition. I know that Chris or Steve is not here. Anything from planning, Shannon?
Just super briefly, we haven't met a lot because of the holidays, but we did get reports on the new affordable housing projects on Washington and on Fifth. So, and both are targeting 820 goals. So it's just say that.
Great. Anything from parks?
I'll defer to next month since it's so late and there's not that much to report.
All right, thank you. Energy. I think our energy rep is not here. City Council, Lisa and Kathy. Nope. Okay. Staff, Leon, anything that you would like to say? Oh, Chris Graham, I see your hand.
Shannon, I've heard that there's a movement afoot in the planning apparatus in the City Hall to greatly condense our master plans to some document that's 100 pages long, so it's not so complicated. The master plan component that refers to natural features is itself 100 pages long or so. it won't work in court for natural features in Ann Arbor to more or less do away with the natural features master plan component. I'm respectfully requesting that you check this out and stop this process, at least insofar as natural features is concerned, but I'm worried about lots of other details that disappear in such a condensation. Don't know if this is happening. I may be completely misinformed. You're not the one doing it. I'm not. Just please, called out in that court case in Ann Arbor Township was the existence of a master plan supporting natural features in the township that was very well detailed. Doing away with it wouldn't be good. Thank you.
Galen, is there any reports from staff?
No staff report this evening.
All right. With that, I have to move to public comment, general time. I'll quickly read that statement, which is that this is an opportunity for people to speak up to 3 minutes. Please call the phone number if you would like to make a comment, and it is 888-788-0099, meeting ID 989-2851-1637. And if you would like to speak, you'll be given a prompt to raise your hand, and you'll be called on with the last 3 digits of your phone number. So, Galen, may I ask if anyone is available to make public comment?
There's no one available for public comment.
All right, thank you. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Kathy, seconded by Shannon. Thank you very much. Everyone in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Very good job, Rita.
Aye.
Very fine job.
All right. Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Thanks for sticking in. I appreciate your watching me fumble through this, and thank you for all your input tonight and for this extended meeting. I'm sorry. All right. Good night. Thank you all.
Thanks.